we have here with us Kaushik Pandey. He is a principal consultant at SISA with about 6+ years of experience in handling risk compliance audits across the globe. The second presenter that we have is Yogesh Patel. Yogesh is authorized core PCI forensics investigator. He has led many PFI investigations across Asia, Pacific, CEMEA, and the US region itself. What we have in today's setting is the presentation goes first with Kaushik, who's going to be talking about how these different statistics are gathered globally. They'll be presented to us of different incidents or events that have happened. And that would be followed by Yogesh, who would be presenting to us some of the interesting forensics that has been taken care of by SISA, which is a forensic-driven cybersecurity organization. Over to you, Kaushik.
Thanks a lot for the kind words, Aslan, and thank you so much, guys, for joining in these difficult times. We wish that all of you are safe and secure in the secure vicinity of your home. Myself, Kaushik, I'll be presenting along with Yogesh for the next 1 hour, along with the, let's say, the CISA's top 5 learning for the year 2020. So without any further delay, let's start today's session. The housekeeping tips are something which has already been covered by Aslan, so we'll not be going ahead with the same again. Let's go quickly with the agenda. So how exactly we have framed out today's session is that, first of all, we'll be talking about the statistics. That what exactly led CISA in coming up with this CISA's top 5 learning? What exactly are the pain points of the organizations? What exactly are the pain points of the market? What exactly the challenges from the market perspective? Okay, that is the root cause which we'll be discussing in the statistics section first. Once we have understood the root cause, once we have understood the challenges, we'll be talking about, okay, how exactly CISA came up with CISA's top 5 and what exactly are these CISA's top 5 learnings as well, right? Once we have understood that, okay, what exactly is the CISA's top 5 learnings and let's say the other things, to summarize the entire event, we have a very beautiful case study to share it with you. Now, that particular case study is basically a live case study, which is, let's say, a part of one of our forensics, you can say, use cases, which we unearthed and came up with a conclusive analysis on the same. However, we have changed a few things over here and there so that we do not impact the confidentiality over there. But majorly, the reasons, the vulnerability, the threats are something which we have covered in the entire breach case study. And once we are done with the breach case study, of course, we'll be coming out with the question and answers. Now, statistics. I believe today, the world, if you'll see, from basically a virtual bank heist to a semi-open attacks from nation states, the last couple of years have been quite challenging, quite rigorous for the entire IT security folks, including you and me. And we have seen majority of threat attackers, or let's say threat vectors, starting from, let's say, a malware, coming to phishing or ransomware, DOS attack. Recently, I believe that Google has introduced, or let's say Google has come up with a particular statistics that in 2017, they were able to, let's say, stop the biggest DDoS attack, which, let's say, the world has faced till now. The DOS being one of them, one of the major threats, the man-in-the-middle attack, the crypto jacking, where we use someone else's system, someone else's computer to basically go ahead and crypto mine and you can say perform the Bitcoining around it the same. Then we have the SQL injection, and lastly, we have the zero-day exploits as well. So basically, with respect to these many, you can say different types of threat attackers, threat vectors being available into the market, it's the job of the security agencies to come out with the latest bulletins. And that is the very reason why you'll see at the very top of your screen, the NSA, the National Security Agency of US, came up with their bulletin. Okay, so basically how exactly they go is that they have very, very huge critical infrastructure to protect. Specifically, let's say the US National Security Systems, the NSS, the US Defense Industrial Base, the DIB, the Department of Defense, and henceforth. And in the latest bulletin, they have said that they are right now very being threatened by the Chinese state-sponsored malicious cyber activities. And that is the very reason why they always come up with the top 25 vulnerabilities which are there inside the market. And let's say which, as of now, as per their bulletin, the Chinese attackers, the Chinese hackers are trying, or let's say, trying to exploit their national security systems. And they have the CVE IDs, the CVE vulnerabilities on the same. So how exactly these attackers work? Basically what they will do is, well, let's say the things which we have seen, what exactly they do is that first of all, they will identify a target. In this particular case, based upon the NSA guidelines, it's let's say the National Security Agency. Now, after that, they will gather the technical information on that particular target, which we call the reconnaissance or let's say information gathering and those phases. Once we have identified, let's say once we have understood a lots and lots of information about that particular target, we'll identify any vulnerabilities associated with that particular target. And then we will develop or reuse the exploit for those vulnerabilities. Now, of course, this will look a bit dicey. That what exactly do we mean by either we'll develop or reuse? Is because if you see the attackers and the hackers, not always they will use the let's say they not always they will custom craft each and every payload, each and every exploit. They will go to the market and see that, okay, what all exploits, what all you can say payloads are readily available, and they might use the same. And that is the very reason why these CVIDs play a very, very crucial role, because those are commonly exploitable vulnerabilities. And then accordingly, they launch the exploitation operations. So if you see the NSA guidelines over here, the National Security Agency guidelines, they have come up with the, let's say, the top 25 vulnerabilities, out of which we have selected the three. So first of all, talks about the Pearl Secure VPNs. It's a CV 2019 vulnerability, 11510, if I'm not mistaken. And that is basically revolving around unauthenticated remote attackers. Now, how exactly it propagates is that they send a specifically crafted URI, and which is able to read the arbitrary file reading vulnerabilities as well inside the organization. Now, what exactly it leads to? It leads to exposures of keys inside your organization, or let's say inside your system, servers, the passwords, and henceforth. Similarly, they are highlighting the F5 big IP, or let's say the load balancer vulnerabilities, which is basically an RCE vulnerability, a remote code execution vulnerability. And on the same front, they're also talking about a Citrix application discovery controller vulnerability, where they're talking about the directory traversal, and they're talking about, again, the remote code execution as well at the end of the day. Now, with all these, let's say, the different vulnerabilities available in the market, what exactly are the local governance guys doing? And that is where you will see that, okay, British Airways just around, let's say, a few days back has been fined with a $20 million, or let's say 20 million pound fine, not dollars, but pound fine. Now, that is being, let's say, being enforced by the ICO, the Information Commissioner Officer, or the office over there, which is basically due to the breach which happened at June 2018. However, those guys were storing clear text data, clear text PII data, specifically clear text card numbers and the other things, from 2015 itself, which led to the breach of around 380,000 people's credit and debit card details. And how exactly they went inside? By exploiting a Citrix-based vulnerability. That's how they, let's say, went inside. I believe Citrix today is not, let's say, a very market gimmick. All of us know what exactly Citrix is. Basically, they give us the VDI, the virtual desktop infrastructure access, and accordingly, we, let's say, assess any of the client's environment. So I'll just give you a brief about that. Okay, how exactly this British Airways, you can say the forensics of the breach happened. Now, I guess all of us know that the employee of an organization is the weakest link, right? And that is the same reason how exactly these British Airways also, you can say, breach started. which we'll, let's say, discuss in some time as the cause of a breach. So the cause of the breach over here was a network account compromise. So basically, there was a cargo handling firm on behalf of British Airways known as Swissport, and their credentials got compromised in two locations in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, once these things got compromised, the username and password, the second thing which we think in our mind that, okay, a username and a password has been compromised, but a multi-factor authentication is still there. A second factor of authentication is still there. But they didn't had a second factor of authentication over there. It means the username and the password gave a gateway to these attackers to go inside this is the British Airways application, the British Airways systems. And accordingly, they entered into the Citrix environment of BA, of British Airways. Now, from there, they went into the, let's say, the British Airways network and copied a lots and lots of tools, because the copy paste options and let's say all those things were enabled from these systems, or let's say from this particular employee's access. And accordingly, they started to perform network reconnaissance. Now, during the network reconnaissance, they really hit the jackpot, because they found out that there was a Windows domain admin username and password credentials which were just lying on a particular server in a folder in a clear text format. And accordingly, they got the complete access over there. However, later, they also got to know about the database admin and password as well from those servers, from those systems itself. Okay. Now, once they have got access to all these things, they were clearly going around the entire network, let's say the entire systems over there, and they found out that the applications, or let's say the application server was dumping, or let's say was having the debug mode on, or let's say was dumping the entire card number along with the CEV2 inside their logs. Now, which is of course quite a challenging, because the people who are familiar with PCI know that, okay, sensitive authentication data, nobody is even allowed to store, which is, let's say, the CEV2 value. But it was being stored at that time. And this all network, the domain access, the database access and everything gave them so much privilege, or let's say give them so much access inside the organization, inside the BA network, the British Airways network, that they were able to even access the source code of the BA website. And accordingly, they were able to plant a card schema, which you will see as a make card. Now, make card is something where which basically goes into your website, and accordingly, it's able to skim each and every card number which is entered over there. The card number, CV2 value, whatever is being entered over there, the same thing will get skimmed and will get transferred to that particular let's see, or the particular attacker. In the same way, you will see lots and lots of vulnerabilities being exploited every day as we speak. What are the general controls which, let's say, the organizations talk about? They say the data which was stolen or modified before the devices are patched will not be elevated by patching. What does that mean? That means that, first of all, we have to focus on patching as much as possible. We cannot leave the stones unturned over here. If there is a critical security patch which has been released by the vendor, then of course you have to go ahead and patch your system. But don't think that, okay, now I'm patching my system, and if there was a malware from the past 1 month, then this particular patch will be able to prevent 1 month old passwords, or let's say the keys and all which were in plain text. No, that might have been gone, because if the malware was still there on your system and you have patched it just now, it means that 1 month old data, 1 month old activities might have been compromised. This will, of course, secure you for the future, but not for the past at that time. One more, you can security control, which the organizers generally prefer, is disabling of the external management capabilities, so that, let's say, an out-of-band management network can be, you can say, raised over there. The blocking and disabling of obsolete, or let's say unused protocols at the network edge, and isolation of the internet services, like having a DMZ, so that let's say organizations are able to, you can say, focus their public-based access, the public-based IPs only into the DMZ so that the internal networks can be secure. And how exactly everything can be secured? Basically by doing a robust logging of the internet-facing services and monitoring the logs for signs of compromise. Because believe me or not, but whichever attacks, whichever compromises we have unearthed, whatever compromises we have been performing the forensics on, their log management solution in 70 to 80% of the cases was developing those alerts, or let's say was coming out with those alerts. But basically, it was coming out with so many alerts in the past that the organizations tend to understand it as a false positive, and they never responded on the same. Many of the organizations, even if let's say they want to respond, they do not have the expertise inside their organization. Okay, how exactly to respond these kinds of alerts, these kinds of cases. I believe that many of you might be knowing about the Target breach, which led to around 30 to 40 million of card numbers getting stolen. They had around 3 to 4 SIM solutions with them. And all 3 or 4 of them actually generated alerts between November and December of 2013 and 14. But nobody responded on the same. Because initially they thought that, okay, it's a false positive. Later, when they understood that, yes, now they have been compromised, they have been breached, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how exactly to respond to that particular alert. Now, based upon these, or let's say based upon so many breaches being happening across the industry, SISA thought that, okay, how exactly SISA as an organization would be able to help, or let's say drive the security initiative towards the industry. And that's how, let's say, we came up with the SISA's top 5. So what was the, let's say, the input behind it was the breach use cases, was the breach analysis. So for those of you who are familiar with the PCI requirements over here, because SISA being a core PFI, a core payment forensic investigator, we have been mapping everything with the requirements of PCI. You will see that in 2019, as per breach analysis, requirement 6, which talks about the patch management, which talks about the application development, which talks about the application level vulnerabilities, okay, played a very, very, very crucial role, or let's say was the root cause of 32% of the breaches. Okay. Similarly, let's say requirement 5, which is about the antivirus, talked about the 6%. Requirement 3, which is about the storage of the card data, was around 4. Requirement 8, which talks about log, or let's say which talks about the access controls, the logical access controls, paid around, let's say, 8. And then requirement 11, which talks about the VAPT practices, the vulnerability assessment and pen test practices, contributed to around 9% of it. Now, these are the root cause. What do you mean by root cause? It means that these actual requirements, these vulnerabilities, acted as an ingress in a network inside an organization. So basically, if you'll see just the case study which we discussed about the British Airways, right? Now their username and password were compromised. They didn't have the multi-factor authentication. So what was the root cause over there? Based upon this particular analysis, it was requirement 8. Because requirement 8 talks about logical access controls. Requirement 8 talks about multi-factor authentication for all the, let's say, remote access employees, or let's say the admins and so forth. Right. So that was the root cause. Now, once, let's say, that particular attacker went inside the organization, I told you they will be going through a lateral network, let's say a lateral movement in the same network. They might be going from one VLAN to the other. They got hold of the username and the passwords. Now, those different vulnerabilities which they exploited after getting inside the network is what we call as a contribution to breach. So the cause of the breach was the username and the password and the multi-factor authentication, which we just discussed. Now, the contribution to the breach, again, you will see around 48% of the times it's requirement 6 again, where we talk about patching, where we talk about software development activities, where we talk about the applications are not even secured with, let's say, OWASP top 10 at the end of the day. They are not being secured with the latest patches being deployed. Around 37% of the times, even requirement 5 is getting impacted. Requirement 5 talks about the antivirus. Majority of the times, the antivirus is not able to detect even if they are able to detect, they have not been configured to actually delete those malwares from the system. They might just go into quarantine, or they might just let's say keep as it is. Because many times what happens is that the administrators configure these you can say antivirus because there are many critical files, let's say the business critical files which are there on those servers, which are required for the functioning of that particular server, which is getting detected by the antivirus. So what they will do is let's say the admins is that they will disable that particular functionality where the antivirus will detect and will delete that particular you can say malware. So if you have disabled it, then of course it will be still present over there and it'll just keep flowing inside it. Requirement 8 is contributing to around 31%. Requirement 8, which is about the logical access controls, around 31%. Requirement 10, which talks about log management, contributing to around 48%. Now, why exactly log management is playing a very crucial role over here? Because we are not able to generate alerts. Even if we are able to generate alerts, we are not able to respond to it. We are not able to understand anything from those alerts, whatever are getting generated. And that is the very reason why in the 46% of the cases in requirement 11, we have so many challenges with respect to VAPT activities as well. The vulnerability assessment and pen test activity, the contribution to the breach. And that's the same, or let's say the same level of, you can say the trends we saw in 2018 as well. In 2018, requirement 5 was playing a very, very crucial role over there, followed by requirement 6, then requirement 8, and so forth. Now, requirement 10 is playing a very crucial role. You'll see that, okay, log management now is one of the greatest contribution over here with respect to a breach. Similarly goes for the vulnerability assessment, pen test activities as well, because majority of the times we have seen that the web applications, what organizations have, do not go through a thorough web application pen test. And being a QSA organization as well, at the end of the day, SISA, we have seen that organizations ask for so many levels of exceptions once we identify application level vulnerabilities. Because they will come back and say that, okay, I do not have the bandwidth, or many of the times they do not have the code even, because there was a particular organization, there was a particular developer who developed that code. Now that particular developer, the entire team is not even available inside the organization. So they are just managing it. And this is something which we have seen a lot of times. Majority of the times, it's dependent upon a vendor. And that particular vendor gave that particular, let's say, entity a timeline of 6 months to 8 months to patch or to close that particular application level vulnerability, which again is one of the most famous causes for the breaches over here. So if you see the cause versus contribution analysis over here from the 2018 and 19, 27 was basically the cause over here, the cause effect, and 46% was the contribution of requirement 6, which again is talking about the patching, which is again talking about the same things. And if you just recap just a few, you can say slides back, the general controls which we discussed over there as well, we were, let's say, focusing upon the patching of those systems, patching of those vulnerabilities, and accordingly the organizations can be safe. Now, these different types of, you can say, the statistics, these different types of challenges, these different types of verbiage across the industry is what led SISA to think that, let's say, how exactly we can make sure that the confidential, let's say, activity, the confidential things of the organizations, we can escape it out, and we'll only include the things which will help the organizations, which will help the fintech industry, which will help every organizations across the globe so that they can be more secure. And that is what led to SISA's top 5 forensic-driven learning. Because being a core PFI, being a forensic investigator, we do unearth each and every analysis, each and every forensic analysis by ourselves. So we get the data firsthand in nature. And that is what the learning which we want to propagate using the SISA's top 5. So based upon the SISA's top 5, what we have seen is the frequent patching, being one of the most important learning which we have identified from the 2019 breach case analysis. It means if organizations would have patched their systems correctly, then of course they would have saved. The second one is the application level vulnerabilities. Majority of the cases, SQL injection being one of the most common one, and the different vulnerabilities, of course, follow after that as well, like cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and the others, right, play a very crucial role over there. Then we talk about the intelligent monitoring, the SOC, the SIM solution, your instant reporting after that is very, very crucial over there. Then we talk about the access management, which basically talks about the access controls which organizations should implement. And then we talk about the instant response and forensics on the same. So why exactly we need to, let's say have requirement 6 or the frequent patching over here as a, you can say as one of the most common criteria per se, because the cause is around 27%, means 27% of the times basically requirement 6 has been exploited. It has been the ingress for most of the attackers, and 46% of the times it has been the contribution. And if you'll try to map this frequent patching, you will even able to match it with requirement 11 as well of PCI. Requirement 11 basically talks about the VAPT activities, and inside it you have an internal VA scan. Now, if you're doing a credential-based internal VA scan across your organization, across your systems inside the organizations, you will find that, let's say, majority of the patches on your operating system, on your, let's say, Hyper-Vs, on the applications which you have deployed on the operating systems might not be there. Means they are not patched correctly. They have not been patched with the latest, you can say, the security patches which have been delivered by the vendor. And that has been, let's say, around 6% of the cause and contribution to around 46%, which is a huge deal. And these are basically the vulnerabilities which are exploited by the attackers and the hackers to create backdoors inside the organization. And accordingly, they have been exploiting around 95% plus cases. And that is based upon the investigation what SISA has done. The solution behind the same is that the patch management service, the patch management policy, the patch management policy implementation across your organization should be exhaustive in nature. PCI says that all the critical security patches have to be deployed within 1 month of release. Sounds good, but during the implementation, can you do that? Sounds a bit dicey. Now that is where, let's say, we need to pull up our socks and say that, okay, all my critical systems have to be patched at least once a month. I cannot escape that at any point in time, especially starting from your web tier and then going inside the organization. It's not just a PCI requirement, it's also talking about the security. It's also talking about the liability as well. Because once an intruder comes inside your organization, you will have no idea that, okay, where to go, how to control this particular malware, and how to basically. Of course, a monthly vulnerability assessment scan, or let's say monthly a VA scan is something which we of course suggest. The second one of the most because top 5 learning, the second learning is application level vulnerability. Now, for those of you who are familiar with PCI, you know that, okay, requirement 6, apart from talking about patching, it also talks about application development activities. And during the application development, they gave a list of around 10 vulnerabilities which organizations should be able to protect it from. Basically, it's more or less mapping with the OWASP top 10 at the end of the day, right? Being the SQL injection and a few other vulnerabilities being one of the most common, because as you can see it over here on your screens, even requirement 6 have been, let's say, around 27% cause and 46% of the contribution. And even with respect to the BA as well, which we just saw some time back, there the make card, the skimmer, which was basically embedded into their web application, was because of a web application vulnerability at the end of the day. And what exactly is leading to all this is because there are so many frequent application changes which are happening, and a thorough application testing is not being performed at the end of the day. So that is the very reason why SISA suggests that all the web interfaces, all the APIs, whether external, whether internal, should be tested throughout. Even from a mobile application perspective as well, even mobile applications, a penetration test, static and dynamic, right? Each and everything should be performed at each and every level so that the applications are tested first thoroughly before they are pushed to release. We do understand that, yeah, business is necessary, but just try to understand the ramifications which will happen once an application, once an infrastructure gets compromised. Then at that time, we won't be able to control, or let's say we won't be able to protect anybody at that time. Now, once the application level things have been performed, we need to understand the intelligent monitoring as well. The cause over here is less because, of course, these log management solutions are not something which get compromised so easily that, okay, it won't be an ingress for any of the attacker. But if the log management is done correctly, then basically your organization can be saved at the end of the day, because you will be able to identify that, yes, a malware has entered into your organization, and accordingly, you'll be able to protect from the same as well. So the steps or the actions which have been taken by the intruder goes inside your logs, and those logs play a very crucial factors for the forensics use cases as well. And why exactly do you think that organizations are not able to, you can say, respond or not able to detect? Because of basically the alert fatigue. So many alerts, so many incidents, or let's say so many false incidents, I should say, that they're not able to understand, okay, what's is true, or let's say what's a false one, or say what is actually an incident being happening and what is exactly going on over there. Okay. So how exactly organizations can secure themselves? By having, let's say, by monitoring the network traffic logs, the net flow, the DNS logs, the web server access logs, and all. Have a threat intelligence repository around the organization. And organizations should use threat hunting steps so that they should be ready at the time when, let's say, a malware is trying to enter, or let's say has already entered and trying to exfiltrate the data outside. They should have a, let's say, a playbook with them. Okay, what are steps they have to perform if this particular thing happens. And lastly, we're talking about the access management, which we just saw during the case study of the British Airways, that that's the law of their access, the multi-factor authentication was not available over there. And we have seen that in around 11% of the cause and contribution of 41%, we have seen that group IDs, the shared user IDs, no multi-factor authentication, okay, has been the root cause of the breach of an organization. Which let's say makes me remember one of the let's say the famous breaches which happened in 2015 and 16 from Marriott, where two employees' admin credentials were compromised, which led to compromise of around 300 plus million card numbers at the end of the day. So you can just understand that how much this requirement 8 about the logical access controls play a very, very crucial role. And that is the very reason why, as SISA, we suggest that, okay, multi-factor authentication is something which is very, very necessary for each and every organization to be implemented. And generic, shared, or let's say group accounts or user IDs should not be used at all at any of the instances. And lastly, the incident response and forensics. Now, the incident response and forensics will play a very crucial role, and that is something which, let's say, our core PFI as well, Yogesh will discuss in some time. About that, okay, how exactly things can be propagated over there. But believe me, if an organization has a strong incident response team with them, which knows exactly what to respond, what exactly are the alerts, what exactly is the true false positive, and what exactly are the true alerts over there, okay, the organizations can be saved. The tools, the technologies, okay, can perform everything, whatever you'll ask them for. It's just that you have to ask them to perform the same. You have to configure it in such a manner that, okay, they generate the alerts. But after generation of the alerts, something which, let's say, you have to make sure is that you should have a playbook in hand so that you can respond to those types of alerts as well. And that is why you will see over here that well-defined incident response plan for the various alerts are not something which organizations have today, which has led to lots and lots of compromises. A comprehensive incident response plan along with the simulation exercise is something which we of course suggest organizations to have and accordingly, let's say, gets secure at the end. So if you see the entire CISA's top five, what CISA came up with, okay, was basically based upon the challenges which the organizations were facing and are facing today. And that is where CISA as an organization has come up with a helping hand so that organizations at the end of the day can be saved, and accordingly their environment, their customers basically can be saved at the end of the day. So on that particular note, I'll just transfer this particular session to Mr. Yogesh. Now, Mr. Yogesh is a core PFI at CISA. Means he's a PFI for payment forensic investigator. He has performed, let's say, lots and lots of forensic breach case analysis, and he has been interacting from the, let's say, many times from the payment brands. Means that is something which, let's say, he's doing every day today. But apart from that, at many of the instances, we were on a call, or say we were on the table with many of the local investigation agencies as well, many of them international as well, okay, where we were trying to understand, trying to help them in unearthing many of the forensic cases. So without further notice, I'll just hand it over to Mr. Yogesh. Yogesh?
Thanks, Kaushik. Before we move forward, I would like to just go through a few terminologies which we usually use while describing the breach. So let's go through them first. Post that, we'll discuss about a new type of attack which is going on across the world that is related to ATM cash out. Post that, we'll go through a complete session on a case study, basically, of a client which we have investigated. So let's go through the terminology first. Let's first talk about the dwell time. The dwell time is nothing but it refers to the length of time from the initial compromise, when the compromise has occurred, to the time when it was identified by the entity or was notified to the stakeholders. The usual dwell time for most of the cases which we are seeing is about 90 days. Also, talking about this particular thing, the hack it, or say the intrusion is not successful, or it's less damaging per se if the breach is identified at the earlier stage, so that it proper incident using a proper incident response, it can be contained and eradicated from the network and causing less damage to the organization. Now, talking about few other terminologies, we while defining various stages of the breach, we use something called as ingress point. It's nothing but the initial point of compromise. That is how the intruder or the attacker was first able to gain access of the client environment. It can be anything starting from a phishing mail to direct web application compromise using SQL or any other method as well. So it's the first point of compromise, how the intruder was able to gain access of the client's environment. Another terminology would be the lateral movement. The lateral movement means how the intruder or the attacker was able to move through the network. So next would be the egress, or say action on objective. That is what intruder has obtained from this attack, or what was the objective of the attack. It can be starting from taking out the card data, or say performing attacks like cryptojacking or anything as such as well, right? And last terminology, which we'll be using in upcoming slide, is persistence. Persistence is nothing but how the intruder was able to maintain his presence in the network, so that even if the systems are rebooted, or even his if he gets detected in one or two systems and the malware or malicious code which he has deployed was removed, how he can regain the access of the environment. That is called as persistence mechanism. Next slide. Let's talk about the ATM cash out. I hope you have heard about this earlier. It's ongoing from in trend from last 2 to 3 years. It's an attack wherein attacker basically gains access of the bank or the payment processor and deploys some malicious code or performs an unauthorized changes such that a transaction which is performed by attacker or intruder using the fraudulent card are approved, and the attackers are able to withdraw the cash from the ATMs. Now, the ATMs which are used are generally acquired ATMs. That is, it is the other bank's ATM which are used, and the transactions are transmitted via payment brand networks. So when we talk about the normal ATM transaction flow, a user will go to an ATM and insert his card, enter his PIN, and then request for ATM cash withdrawals. The request is generally sent to the acquirer's switch application. A switch application is nothing but an application which is used to route the transaction. Its core task is to authenticate the card and to check whether card belongs to that particular bank or it belongs to some other bank, so that the transaction can be routed accordingly. So if the card belongs to the same bank, it would be routed or say processed further with validation of the data and then authorization based on the balance available, etc. If it is the other bank card, then the transaction would be routed further to the payment brand networks, and payment brand will then determine the card belong to whom and route the transaction to their environment. So at the receiving or the issuer's environment, basically this transaction would land, and the switch application of the issuer bank basically would then process it further. Now, if it is a debit card, the transaction would be routed to the core banking where it would be authorized. If it is a prepaid card, then it would be sent to the card management system, CMS, or any other application which is hosting the balance. So once the transaction is approved by core banking or card management system of the issuer, and the response would be sent back to the switch application, the switch application would generate a final response that would be whether the transaction is approved or declined. And the complete message would be sent back to the payment brand. The payment brand would forward that to acquire switch, and in turn, acquire switch will instruct ATM to, by sending the response message back to ATM, whether it was a successful transaction or failed. If it is a successful, the ATM would then dispense the cash. So this is the normal ATM transaction flow. However, in case of ATM cash out, what happens is the intruder first, as he has compromised the issuer environment, he performs certain kind of changes in the environment, such as deploying a malicious code in the switch application or somewhere else, or performing any other changes, which will lead to the transaction being approved for those particular set of cards. So if the transaction originates from anywhere for that particular cards, the transaction, though it would be routed in the same manner, but as soon as it reaches the bank or processor environment, it would be always approved kind of thing. And the approved response would be sent back from the issuer processor environment back to the payment brand and to the acquirer. Moving forward. The type of or the trends which we have observed in case of ATM cash out are that the debit or the prepaid cards are usually used for carrying out these attacks. So intruder performs modification in terms of, say, balance of the prepaid cards or debit cards, or uh, deploying malicious code for altering the response for these particular cards. We have not seen so far a credit card being used in this kind of attack. The main objective of ATM cash out is to monetize the attack as soon as possible, so that they can get hold of cash instead of, and there should be a less, say, evidence of compromise altogether. Um, in most of the attacks which we have seen, there was no or very limited traces of the transaction in the environment. In one type of case, which will be, or one type of the case which we'll be discussing in upcoming slide, only for those type of cases we have seen that the transactions was actually logged in the issuer's environment. In rest of the cases, we have not seen a single trace of the transaction in the complete environment. Uh, in ATM cash out, mostly the fraudulent transactions were carried out from across the world in very short span of time, like saying that in 1 or 2 hours. Uh, and the volume of transactions was very high. We have also seen that earlier in ATM cash out, the intruder was using, say, max type cards for carrying out the transaction, and usually clone card was used for carrying out ATM cash out. But in recent trend, which we are seeing, the intruders are using EMV chip cards, which was issued to them by the bank. So basically, we are seeing that the attacker goes into the bank, becomes a customer of that particular bank, post compromising the network, and then carry out the fraudulent transaction using those particular issued cards. In most of the cases which we related to ATM cash out, we have seen that the dwell time was around 180 days. And in the case which we are going to discuss in upcoming slide, it was around 2 years. Also, the next trend which we are seeing is that the generic or the group account or the application credentials are usually used to carry out these activities. This would, the one of the reason which we could think of is that the multi-factor authentication and the accountability parameter. So multi-factor authentication would be implemented for, say, application credentials. Also, when we talk about generic or use of the group account, the accountability is very critical issue, which we feel, because we won't be able to trace back which user has performed this activity because it's not linked to a particular user. We are seeing the shift from the complex attacks such as code injection or binary modifications, which were earlier used for carrying out ATM cash out, to a very simpler kind of attack, which is like modifying a balance using, say, CMS application itself, or say core banking application itself, or rather altering that at the database level itself. Also, we are seeing that nowadays the attackers are not just withdrawing the cash from the ATMs, but they are also using the cards to purchase the jewelry or costly items using POS transactions during the ATM cash out window. So apart from carrying out ATM cash out, they are also performing these kind of purchases so that they can monetize it in much faster manner. The types of ATM cash out which we are seeing are as below. The first one is the ATM cash out using code injection attack. The second one is the ATM cash out using binary modification. And the recent one which we are seeing is ATM cash out using balance or limit modification. We'll discuss each of these, what is these or how this happens. In ATM cash out using code injection or say binary modification, the attack pattern which we have observed was nearly similar. In most of the cases which we have investigated, we have identified that the intruder gained access of the environment from non-critical system and then performed their lateral movement to the critical infrastructure, hosting, switch application, card management application, or core banking application, basically their core critical systems. And in this particular type of attack, basically, the intruder gained access of the switch application server, and then they modified or injected the code in the switch application process which was running. The code was responsible for generating a fake response for the transaction with a specific set of cards which belong to the intruder. So in case of during the attack window, when the transaction originated for that particular set of card, uh, that particular piece of code invoked and it read the message out from the network and just responded with a fake response back to the payment brands and removed it from the buffer altogether. So from the environment perspective, the switch application never received this particular transaction. However, the response was sent back to the payment brands, and in the settlement report, basically client was able to see that, okay, this transaction was approved by them, but they don't have any traces of this transaction altogether. And during this particular attack window, there was the risk transaction for the other cards was flowing in and passing on as a normal operation. There was no interruption in those kind of transaction altogether. Talking about the binary modification in this, instead of just changing the so injecting the piece of code into the running process, the intruder replaced the binary itself of the switch application, and which was performing the similar behavior as discussed earlier for code injection attack. Talking about the ATM cash out using balance or limit modification, this is a new type of attack which we are seeing. The attack pattern or the ingress point and the lateral moment are similar to the previous cases, but the difference is in the targets basically. So instead of targeting the switch application based on the cards which the intruder was able to gain, whether it was a debit card or whether they have went ahead and issued a prepaid card, uh, they gained access of these particular systems. Either it was an application level access or access to the database itself, and then modified the balance of that particular cards and the limit associated to that particular cards to a very significantly high value, so that when the transaction comes in, and it is because the card was issued to them, the PIN and other factors and even the EMV chip validation would succeed because it's an actual card which was issued. However, the balance was modified, due to which as they had significantly high balance, the transaction was approved and they were able to withdraw the cash. So the whole scenario depends upon how the balance is modified and can we stop the intruder before they reach to such critical systems. Moving to next slide. Let's talk about the case study of the ATM cash out using balance modification, one of the case which we have investigated. Just to give you a high level overview of the environment, it was a bank environment, and the bank was issuing both debit and prepaid cards. The ATM cash out was carried out using their prepaid bin range. And talking about the opting system, so the environment had the CMS and the switch application, other critical applications was hosted in the Linux-based environment. However, for the user segment, they was using Windows environment with Active Directory as a central authentication. They also had SIM solution in place, and the monitoring was outsourced to a third-party service provider. In this particular attack, basically, admin user received a phishing mail on his business email, and unfortunately, he accessed that link and had downloaded a macro-enabled document. That macro-enabled document had script which would in turn install once executed, will install the malware, which would give the capability of remote access to the intruder. It was like a RAT, remote access Trojan. However, it was custom built. It was not a commonly identified malware. This is the attack pattern which we are seeing in most of the cases, that intruder are starting to use the custom malware instead of using the well-known source. Uh, Also, we have seen in certain cases that intruder went ahead and checked in Virus Total, which is one of the most popular engine. The malware was tested before 1 or 2 days before it was deployed in the client environment. This we were able to correlate a bit as well in few of the cases. So talking about the current case, the intruder, as admin has executed this file, the malware was deployed on his system and his system was compromised. Now, due to presence of rat, the intruder was able to push other tools such as keylogger and other custom tools which can be used for SSH tunneling into the system. Using keylogger, he was able to gain credentials of various application sets, servers which admin was accessing, and he was also able to gain the IP sets and other things which he was accessing on as part of his day-to-day function. With that, the intruder was able to, using the credential of admin, he was able to access the Active Directory server itself and create an account for him. And through this account, he was, because it was a domain administrator account, he was able to gain access of all the connected user systems one by one, which was available. He also deployed remote scanning, network scanning tools such as Nmap and other tools as well for network reconnaissance as well as for password cracking. Uh, Based on that, he was able to build a complete persistence in user segment, and ultimately then moved to the say critical segment using the credentials which was identified and the systems which was acting as bot for him because he had the custom tools deployed, rat deployed. And using that, he was able to ultimately perform lateral movements and gain access of card management system database itself, and then modify the balance and the limits of the cards which was issued to them. Only a limited set of cards was, the balance of limited cards was modified. And we have also seen that the random values was used instead of using the same amount for all cards. There was few set of card with random values so that it's not easily traceable. Uh, Once this was done, we have seen that the attack started just within 2 or 3 hours post implementing these changes or say updating the balance. The huge surge of transactions came in from across the world, and which led to the ATM cash out. In this attack, we also saw that intruder tried to perform e-commerce transactions as well as POS transactions as well. However, they was very limited post performing all the ATM cash outs. Moving to next slide. As we are running low on time, these are the few threat hunting steps which we recommend to implement. The threat hunting can be carried out at the operating system level using the operating system logs. One is to monitor the FIM logs by running the density scout, which basically checks the density of the application, whether it is packed or unpacked, and what is the compression ratio. Basically, we in most of our investigation, we see that malwares are always packed. So the density would be very high. Next is to do a digital signature checks. Sure. Talking about the threat hunting using the service logs, we can do that by, hunting for the domains, hunting at the web access log level. That can be done using, which methods are used the threshold for that, the URL length of that, talking from the hunting domains. We can check for the randomness of the domains. When was this domain first observed in your network? Whether these domains are the baby domains or they have been present web for a long time. And similarly, when we are hunting based on the hunting based on the IP, we can look for the blacklisted IP or perform a long tail analysis on ASN and the geo IP to identify from where the traffic is coming from and whether we have any traffic from the region which we don't serve altogether. These are the few steps. Also talking about the outbound connection, we can check for the, this is the last thing which we can do. It is like, from where we are getting more requests or where it is, the data is transmitted out in a high volume. These are the few steps which we recommend you to implement on your, along with your day-to-day monitoring. This will help to improvise the security posture of your organization.